My name's Eric McCoy. Welcome back to Recovering Through Highness. Hey, this podcast and my life in general has swirled within the world of substance abuse, as most people know. And before I introduce my guest today, whose passion is to educate and help end the stigma on mental illness, I want to explain real quick how our purposes are the same. Addiction to drugs and alcohol is mental illness, and it's better known as substance use disorder, defined in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or also known as the DSM-5. Whether people agree with this or not, alcoholism was first recognized as an illness in 1956 by the American Medical Association. The federal government eventually led towards that direction, with alcoholism being a disease, but drug addiction seems to be a lot more complicated. As the American Medical Association, the American Psychiatric Association, the 12-step program, and insurance defining treatment as a medical necessity, as the DSM-5 defines it as a mental disorder, to me, a sense of hypocrisy encompasses this dilemma. Drug addiction, if defined as a mental illness, and I see no difference with this and all addictions, such as alcohol or behavioral addictions, how can you arrest someone for their mental illness? My mental illness, according to the medical field, was amphetamine use disorder severe, requiring that I break the law to acquire that condition. So my guest today is Tiffany Werhner, who is a licensed mental health counselor, author of a best-selling book titled There's a Light Within You That Never Goes Out. And she is the host of a radio show, Moments of Clarity with Tiffany. You can hear her on Tan Talk Radio, 1340 AM, 106.1 FM, Tampa Bay, 140.3 FM, WDCF AM 1350 Dade City, and WZHR AM. Now, Tiffany, if you've noticed, I actually didn't mention one of the cities because I don't know if I'd even.
Well, pretty much those radio stations cover most of Florida, right. But then it's syndicated in Texas as well. And then we do a lot of virtual. It's on almost every podcast possible: Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, iTunes. You could actually, I'm pretty excited about this. You can ask Siri, hey Siri, subscribe me to the Moments of Clarity podcast. And Siri will say, yes, same with Alexa. So it's on Amazon Music and all sorts of podcasts, but primarily we air live off of Facebook Live, off of Tiffany Werhner, and YouTube. We have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/MOC with Tiffany. So it's a Moments of Clarity with Tiffany YouTube channel that airs all of them live, as well as live radio that reaches about 12 million, and then plus with all the podcasts. So I'm pretty excited about it. Yeah. With the mission to end the stigma on mental health.
Absolutely. What is that? What's that city? Exciting. What's that city? Zephyr Hills?
Zephyr Hills, yes.
That's the reason I actually didn't mention the city.
It's like the water. Have you ever drank Zephyr Hills water bottles?
Okay. Okay, so
I think that's where it comes from. There's a spring there, I think. That's
right. So Tiffany, I know that you are typically not the one that is interviewed, and so
I know
this is actually kind of exciting.
Yeah, done it a couple times, but yeah, I'm usually the host.
Yeah, and so I know one of the things that you always like to ask and to get into a little bit is for those of us that work in the mental health or behavioral health industry, there was a reason that we got into this industry. And I'm curious on understanding a little bit of what your reasoning for this. I think that most therapists, psychiatrists, psychologists are crazier than everybody else.
Hey there now.
Hey, I'm a counselor too. So I fall into that.
I think that there was once a time where we thought we were about to be crazy, but with the proper help, I think every healthy adult and therapist should have a therapist. And I don't know what a definition of crazy means, but maybe going through something and had it not been addressed before.
Yeah.
It's like, so I don't know what normal is, so I don't know what crazy means either.
Yeah. Well, I remember studying, abnormal psychology, and, of course, abnormal was defined as wherever you live, so like whatever culture that you live in. If you live in the United States, we have what's defined as abnormal. If you live in Africa, they'll have what's defined as abnormal, or if you live in, other different countries. So abnormal psychology can ultimately be where you live and what's defined as abnormal in that place, So anyways, tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay, so you're asking me what prompted me to want to get into mental health.
Yes.
Okay. I knew you were going to ask that question, and I've been interviewed a few times, and people tend to ask that question, and I usually start with the fact that I lost my parents at a young age. But lately, there's been some people coming around and guests I've had on my show, which made me do some thinking, and I think it started earlier than that, around high school. I was getting bullied, but not bullied in the sense of mean kids at school, but it was my first love, like a boyfriend that was just, I had turned kind of psychotic. And in retrospect, some of the stuff that he put me through, we would have called the police by it today. But back then, there was no mental health. There was like whatever. I mean, to the point where every time I tried to leave him, he would do something, and my parents were just upset about it at the time. Why does he keep taking it out of the car? Like, he was slashing my tires, chase me with a baseball bat, put death threats, and tell anyone if they asked me out, that he would fight them. Bag my car, threw me in a pool at a party once. Just mean. Let the air out of my tires at a party so I couldn't get home. To get me back together with him when he was abusive and unfaithful, right?
Those were his tactics to get you back together?
Yeah, like threatening. So, I know, right? So at the same time, instead of calling the police, I ended up with a pair of steel-toe Doc Martens and 8 years of kickboxing. I started hanging around on my own, which back in the day, like, I think in retrospect, it's made me a stronger person too. But I was going through that at the same time as all of that. But I was still, popular. I was on cheerleading. I was in sports, on the track team. I had a lot of friends. So it wasn't like this bullying and his threatening was, fearful to me, I guess. But at the same time, it did impact my self-esteem. So I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I have a bat in the back of my trunk of the car. I'm like, that's me. I'm just going to fight back. I'm not going to tell anyone or whatever. I didn't want to snitch at the time. I guess that's just how it was. But so going through that, right as I was going through that, I had just graduated high school and then getting ready for first semester of college, where I decided to take at a local community college and then transfer into University of Florida fall. And I was getting ready for school and woke up early and went to the bathroom to get ready and found my mother unconscious on the floor. And she had a brain aneurysm and never woke up. Was on life support for about 7 days, and we had to watch as they pulled the plug. There was no waking up from that, but it had made her brain dead, basically. And so going through the bullying, plus that, I started hanging around with the wrong friends, but also, and so drinking a lot and things, I was already getting traumatized, but that was just, put me over the top. Anyway, so during college, I lost both grandparents. My grandma, my mother's mom, died from depression, I think from losing her daughter. She just went downhill and died the next year. Grief and loss a lot. And I was grieving as well. And my grandmother that lived with us my whole life passed away the next year. And then 2 years after that, my father passed away from Agent Orange, after serving as a war hero, as a captain, first lieutenant, and as a Marine in the Vietnam War. And so he died in 2001, right after 9/11 too. But during that time, I think I was feeling like I lost everyone at once. You know, not only that, but didn't know who to trust, hanging around the wrong friends, kind of probably for protection from what I was going through at school, and drinking a lot, and kind of lost my path. And when I wasn't raised like that. So as I was in school, I was an undecided major for the first 2 years. And they said, well, you need to decide by junior year what your major is. Honestly, Eric, I was thinking marine biology here. I don't know. But they said, do you have enough credits to get a minor in psychology or sociology? So obviously I was taking these classes probably to not only because I found them interesting, but some of them, you know, at the time applied to somebody fixing themselves, which was me, right? And I chose sociology, but then, and I was like a straight A student through all this too, honor society. And so to join the National Sociology Honor Society, I attended one meeting and said, so I changed it back to psychology, as I think social work was for me. And so started on with psychology because I saw not only that, but I wanted to work with at-risk youth, because not only being bullied, but being witness to bully, bystander to bully, having to succumb that, and along with grief and loss and sudden loss. So like with my mom, with my mother, it was instant, no warning. And then with my father, I saw him suffer and, you know, pass away with cancer from the Agent Orange. That was just getting through it was like a helmet, like through his brain and his lymph nodes and everything. It was pretty evident through the VA. He's one of the first people that actually was like bringing on that this is the Agent Orange did cause this cancer for a lot of veterans, because it's pretty common now. But when this is the clincher, when I was, before my father passed away and I was going through this hard time and everything, I had told my father that I need to talk to someone. I'm losing my mind and I don't know who to trust. And he said, you're not crazy. You can get through this, and you don't need a psychiatrist or counselor. And that's not what our family does. And that's when I was introduced to the stigma of mental health right there, first time, where not only that, but everything I was going through, instead of my parents sticking up for me and replacing, like calling the cops, they would just replace the tire with slashed, or, you know what I mean? Fix the car or whatever, everything that I was getting bullied with. Like, no one thought, I was like, I got this. And I'm like, kick butt back. Like, that's the mentality. I guess that's my mentality anyway still. But it's just like, I'll handle it on my own. And I don't know and I want to thank him for doing that, because if I didn't go through all of this, like, you know, I do miss my parents, but if I didn't go through all of that, I wouldn't be the person I am today. I wouldn't be as strong and as confident and willing to take on new things without fear if I hadn't been faced with all that, you know. It made me stronger and more self-confident by accident. So it's almost like I'm grateful for what I've gone through. And losing my parents, I think, took a long time. I found the right therapy and therapists, and got through, you know, school. And during that time, I was in school to be a counselor with counseling psychology. So I was surrounded by therapists, professionals, and soon to be therapists, my classmates and everything. So I had a lot of support, which I'm grateful for too. But everything that I think that happens to us bad, turns us into who we are today. Mm-hmm. I've got a strong spiritual faith that I'll see them again one day, but that everything happens for a reason, and I'm supposed to do something positive with it.
According to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, they say mm-hmm. that, 1 in 6 United States youth that are aged 6 to 17 experience a mental health disorder every year. Now, I know with you, and you had kind of mentioned the youth, and a lot of the stuff with you happened when you were much younger. How much, and grief and loss. I know that was, something that we had discussed on the phone a little bit, and then you had
1 in 6?
1 in 6 youth in the ages of 6 to 17 experience a mental health disorder. Okay. And
diagnosis or disorder?
A disorder. And so my question, I guess, is how much do you think grief and loss plays into that stuff? I mean, we talk about, obviously, clinical disorders, chemical imbalances, but then we also look at life things that happen. Mm. And how much stuff do you think that relates to, like, that idea of grief and loss?
How many kids do you not know that are not going through adjustment disorder of some sort? I mean, divorce is more common than people are surprised when they're like, your parents are still married nowadays, and so, kids going through that, or change of schools, or losing friends, or there could be some PTSD there, that, anything that they find traumatic as well, or losing a loved one, or any of that.
Yeah, because, suicide, is the second leading cause of death for people ages between 10 to 34 or something like that. Mm-hmm. And that's something I think that we're really seeing a lot of. I noticed on your show too, you had that suicide, awareness.
Prevention. Yeah.
Prevention. And
there's a lot of stuff on the internet, like 13 Reasons Why and stuff like that kind of give kids an idea of that. Because back when I was young, we didn't think about that stuff. I mean, it wasn't as common. But the world's changing, and that's why mental health is like taking a step forward. I think that it's made a large movement forward, but not far enough. We have quite a ways to go on ending the stigma on mental health. And
yeah, because you have kids that are growing up, with substance abusing parents. You have kids grow up that, with parents that have mental illness, where they ultimately become the adult taking care of the parent. We got kids growing up in sexually or physically abusing family systems, where they ultimately lose their innocence, I guess you could say, with that grief and loss.
Sexual abuse is more common, and child abuse, and there's a lot of things that we're finding are more common than we knew about before. Yeah. And it's a shame to know how common adult survivors of sexual abuse is. Like, there's more than you think. Rape and molestation, anything.
Yeah, I did a podcast with my wife, who grew up with a grandfather who sexually abused her and possibly her siblings or some of her siblings. And I asked her this question, and I was really thinking about it when I was doing the podcast, is that, we live in a society where, there's so much about what we do for the victims that it has already happened to. How much are we doing as a culture to help prevent these things from happening? Because, I always hear all the time, the people that are like, well, it's up to the families to educate, or it's up to the families to, take care of this issue. A lot of parents don't want, this stuff brought to schools. They don't want this introduced to their children, of sexual or drug, abuse, because their ideas is it promotes sex, right? But what if it's the family that's doing this? And that's what I always
that's why up with. Well, usually it's the family that's doing it, don't want to address it or take them to counseling because they don't want their family exposed, right. Which later on in life, when the adults come into my office as survivors, by the way, I don't use the word victim. I think someone that says that they're a victim is living in fear and shame and guilt. Sure. When they come to, and the only thing that's overpowering fear is hope. identifying themselves as a survivor of something so tragic.
Yeah, but sadly, our culture defines them as victims. I mean, the courts.
I understand that culture, but the individual themselves can re-identify and reprogram their mind to not be a victim.
Yes, absolutely.
And they can be, I'm a survivor, not a victim, where something bad happened to us. We've survived the worst days of our lives up to this point 100% of the time. We need to pat ourselves on the back. And the same day, the worst days of our lives will never be repeated exactly the same. We could go through more bad stuff, of course. You know, life is life. But the worst day of our lives will never be the same twice.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. You know, that these are survivors. You know, I even promote that idea with substance abuse. You know, the people that are able to go through that stuff and walk out of it and be able to stand tall, you know, after experiencing the hell that they put themselves through and then experienced. You know, I mean, we talk about putting himself, that at least it started with choices. It becomes something much different than that. And I can attest to that firsthand. But these people are definitely survivors. And I like that term.
I think everyone should be identifying as a survivor. I think the victim role gets used too easily. Mental health gets used as a crutch a lot. I'm doing this because I have anxiety, or I can't do this because, or whatever. And I think people are stronger than they give themselves credit for a lot. And that when we have that idea, that belief within ourselves, that self-confidence, that we are strong to persevere through something else. Like, we've been through worse, and believe in ourselves more, then I think people will reach their full potential in life, like, and not be held back by labels or things of the past that can be repaired or healed from. Maybe not forgotten, but healed and seen in a different perspective.
Yeah, that's what I was actually going to ask you. I like the fact you used a label, because I was going to ask you what you actually thought of labels. You know, we label ourselves, we limit ourselves. And you know,
labels are for food, not people.
Right.
I mean, we have to get the right diagnosis so we can treat the symptoms with the right kind of therapy. Don't get me wrong.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean that we have to walk around labeling ourselves. We should know the symptoms of whatever we're going through, so that we can target the symptoms, face triggers, understand symptoms of depression, anxiety, traumatic stress, everything, and know when to actually seek help for it and what to do and how to reframe our thinking. I mean, the brain, the DNA, it's crazy. I had Dr. Jennifer Frazier on my show not that long ago. We're talking about DNA in the brain and how trauma can affect the brain. And I mean, she can put it in such a great way, but that trauma and things affect our brain and the way we think and react to situations. But we can reprogram that when we heal from it, and we can react differently. And without healing, like the brain is an organ, and it's the best part of like everything. And it's kind of like if we broke our arm and didn't get a cast on it, it might work, but it will never work the same. You know, we have to heal it the right way with help. And a lot of people are afraid to heal their brain and not so embarrassed of having a cast on their arm. It's just, beside me sometimes, because there's so many more things we can do in life when we don't live with fear or obsessions or compulsions or depression or self-medicating or anything. When we actually find the right way that we can actually live happier, healthier lives by healing our brain. It's
you grow up in a family and you experience these horrible things, and then you've got also people that can grow up in the same family but obviously behave and deal with things differently. How much do you think nature has to do with mental illness, or how much do you think it's the nurturing of how you grew up and the experiences that you had that had to do with mental illness?
It depends on each individual, I think. Everything's individualized. We can't just generalize everything. But I mean, there's definitely some people that would be different if they had grown up differently in a healthier family or something like that, and not turn to substances. or drug addiction or things like that, or vice versa. But as you know, mental health is genetic as well. So it has a predisposition that if there's mental disorder in the family history, that it's likely to be passed down as well. So not every time, not every generation, but if there's bipolar in the family, for instance, there's a significant amount of generations passed down that are diagnosed with that disorder later on in life, or early 20s, early onset. But
more of a susceptibility to it.
Yes, there's a predisposition that it's genetic, but not every person. So if my mother had 3 children, not every child would have it, but likely if they do, it came from the mom's side of the family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I wrote my book, I actually thought really heavily on that. I do a chapter called Think, 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 right? Where, it's really about helping people learn how to think for themselves, not thinking through the minds of other people, which we have a society that seems to just want everybody to think through their mind because they're right, and not teaching people the ability to think for themselves. And I start the chapter with the story of Ed Gein. Ed Gein was Ed Gein was the basis for Leatherface of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the basis of Norman Bates with.
What do you mean the basis of? He came up with it?
So the writers and authors of these stories based these characters off of this real guy whose name was Ed Gein. And so back in the 50s, he grew up with a fanatically religious mother, right? A mother that, repeatedly told him all women are going to take you to hell. They're all evil. They're all whores. And the only time that he was ever allowed to leave the house was to go to school. He wasn't allowed to associate with anybody outside of school. So he wasn't allowed to have friends. And they believe also that there was an incestual relationship between his mother. And so he grew up in this just insane type family of, again, not allowing him to think for themselves. And so, again, he wasn't really allowed to get any influences from anybody outside of his household. And so what ultimately happened was that after his mother passed away, there was a belief that maybe he kept her body for a period of time.
That's the movie Psycho, Norman Bates or whatever, right?
There was a lady who owned a hardware store in this town. It was some Midwestern town that owned a hardware store, and she went missing. And so the police got involved. They went down to the store, and the last receipt that was written was to Ed Gein, and his vehicle was seen to be in the parking lot, was the last vehicle in the parking lot. So they ended up getting a search warrant, went to his house, and when they went into his house, they found in the back shed the decapitated body of this lady. They found lampshades that was made of human skin. They found a jar of vulvas. They found another lady's head in the refrigerator in a jar. So this kind of starts going into, Texas Chainsaw.
Sadistic, yeah.
And also Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs. And
I mean, that's sociopathic stuff.
Yes.
Antisocial and.
Yeah, but the question really comes up is that now his mother was also believed to be schizophrenic. And so the question then comes up is how different would he have been if he grew up in a different household?
Who knows? Like, what if he had the same diagnosis? And then, of course, severe child abuse, severe repetitive child abuse, and sexual abuse, like cultural sexual abuse, satanic rituals, all this stuff. A lot of people, the brain is so powerful that a lot of people develop dissociative identity disorder, and it blocks it out, which was formerly known as multi-personality disorder. A lot of times, I mean, it's case by case here, you don't know what he was putting through, but his brain could have disassociated and he could have developed psychotic symptoms because of the abuse and the repetitive abuse. And that's been shown in sexual abuse, human sex trafficking, all these things. Most of the people that end up with dissociative identity disorder, multi-personality, formerly known, were repetitively abused as children. And the brain's so powerful, it protects us, and it splinters and builds different personalities that can handle things, that can erase things, that can protect us, repress memories. To it's a phenomenon of how powerful the brain is and the mind is. But I mean, who's to say that they weren't, both psychotic? And sexual relationships between parent and child, especially when it's consensual, I don't know, not all the time. And I know some people, like in the book that I've interviewed, that were tortured and horrified. I mean, some horrible things. One of the one of the survivors in my book, because I wrote There's a Light Within You That Never Goes Out. It's adult survivors of sexual abuse and incest. And one of the characters, her story is horrifying. She last I know, she had 50-something reconstructive surgeries just in her genital area from rape from her father and brothers, and gang raped and tied in the woods, naked, left for critters and stuff like that, from age 1 to 14. And her mother knew. However, this woman led to substance abuse, was in recovery for alcoholism and stuff, was the nicest person I've ever met, but just kind, would never hurt anything, and just doesn't. The main thing was didn't know what that she was still being abused by her husband. Didn't know what normal, like how people are supposed to treat you. She was afraid to make eye contact with other people, fearful of people. And we worked together, and she would have emotional breakthroughs in counseling, and then I would have sniffles or something just from allergies, and she'd be the one reaching out to me the next day asking how I'm feeling before I'm just like, yeah. And so it doesn't always turn out like that. Not every person that's abused turns into a predator. There's no proof in any of that. But and I even asked her, how do you even know how to celebrate holidays and stuff? And I saw it in the movies.
So you're the first person that's actually a licensed clinician that I've actually had on my show. I've had great guests on my show, but you're the first licensed clinician. And
yay, I'm a first.
Yeah, and so
breaking the seal.
There we go. And working in the substance abuse industry as long as I've been working in it since 2003, a lot of years. And there's a lot of things that I've always been really frustrated with. And I want to ask the licensed clinician on what you think about the duty to report. We talk about TerraSoft, right? The TerraSoft, duty to warn, duty to report. And everybody knows this. And people that come in and meet with clinicians all have this understanding that I know that I can say anything I want except certain things. So as long as I don't say that I'm going to hurt myself or I'm going to hurt somebody else, then my confidentiality is good. So I'm not going to say those things. And do you ever get that feeling from clients that they withhold information that could be detrimental? We talk about, again, the second leading cause of youth death is suicide, and how many people withhold information that we would really be able to utilize to help them if they were able, or if they were willing to disclose this, because obviously they don't want to get stuck in a mental hospital, or if they say, I'm going to hurt somebody else, end up in jail because of terrorist threat charges.
The suicidal ideations and stuff like that. I hear what you're saying. There's a big difference between suicidal fleeting thoughts, ideations, there's a level of lethality, where they have an intent or plan, or that I'm going to go home and find a gun or whatever. That's definite. But there's sometimes it's okay to say, life has been hard and I just wish I'd be better off dead.
Sure.
It's not Baker actable. That's, I think everyone gets those thoughts every now and then, or life gets hard and the fleeting thoughts are not Baker actable. I make it clear to my clients that we will talk through it. And just because they're having those thoughts, I want to know why and what's going on in their life. And let's talk through it and make their situation better and problem solve. And I can get a sense usually when someone is trying to tell me something without telling me something. And I reassure them that that's not, I'm not going to just jump the gun and call and put them in the hospital. That will work through it. And then if they need hospitalization, then we go that route. But I don't have that feeling that that people have withheld anything, not in my practice so far.
Because I have seen it. I have seen the individuals that we found out later that were purposely withholding information because they did not want to get locked in a hospital that did end up committing suicide. And
well, the thing is with me right now, I'm a private practice outpatient counselor. So people come to me because they want help, not because they're forced to. So it's kind of like, what's the point of paying me to lie? It doesn't make sense. So I don't experience that now. When I worked in residential and correctional facilities back in the day, yeah, they didn't want to tell the truth because they didn't want to get in trouble for stuff, that kind of stuff. But that's different than how I've been practicing for the past 10 years with.
Yeah, complete voluntary is different.
Right.
But yes, when there is a push from somebody, whether it be family members or the legal system.
Yeah, like the ones that are court ordered or sent to me because their job says that there's probably something wrong and they're showing anger at work or whatever. I sense that they're holding back a little bit, but I don't really take those clients on very much anymore because it's like pulling teeth. Like, just talk to me. They feel forced to come to therapy only because someone told them to. I don't really do that anymore, but the controlled forced therapy that's either court ordered or mandated or whatever, you can send flies from that. They're just trying to get themselves out of trouble. Mm-hmm. But the ones that hire me because they're like what I do now, they come to me because they want help with what they're going through and they're willing to work on their problems because they searched me out, not the other way around, Mm-hmm.
That has really been a frustrating thing because I really think it's like we want honesty, but we don't want real honesty, because if you tell us real honesty, then we're gonna lock you up, and even the fact of I want to hurt somebody else, I want to fucking kill that person, right? And to me, it's like, what we think and what we do are two different things, and part of that law to me says that. I can get arrested for not even doing anything, if I'm ultimately thinking in a certain way. Does that make sense to you?
Not from outpatient counseling, no.
Right.
But I don't think that, that's a higher level, but that doesn't really happen in the practice that I'm now, but it's happened in the past where people want to say the right thing just to get themselves out of whatever their trouble they're in.
If you say the things that are really the most important for you to say to us, those are the things that are going to get you in trouble.
The people that scare me the most are the people that think that they don't need counseling or are afraid to go. So those are the personality disorders, or the people that are actually thinking those things. They don't want to come to a counselor and get help for the fact that they want to go commit homicide or put someone's head in a fridge. They don't seek help. That's the whole point. They are doing what they do and they know that they're going to get in trouble for it. They don't want to go tell anyone. They're not the ones that seek help. The narcissists, the sociopaths, the antisocial personality disorder, the severe disorders are the ones that don't seek voluntary help. They're just doing something and they know they can't talk about it. That's the difference. Or they don't identify themselves as having a problem because they lack empathy, remorse, they don't have those qualities, so they don't see that what they're doing is wrong.
Yeah.
They see it completely different through different eyes, because they don't have remorse. They think that what they're doing serves their own purpose, or you know what I mean. So they think completely different.
Yeah.
And those are the more severe people that do horrific, terrible things like that.
Yeah.
That they don't understand it. Nobody with remorse or empathy are going to go slice someone's head off and put it in a fridge.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So going back to,
like, unless they were like, they did it and they're like, sorry about this.
Right. I don't think
it doesn't happen.
So going back to, dealing with all the grief and loss, and you ended up seeking therapy and doing those things. Aside from the therapy itself, what were the things that you did that really helped you?
Well, the kickboxing was a very good therapeutic outlet. Things I did, this is a long time ago, that helped me, the therapy, like, it just started to let me see things differently. I realized that, instead of, because I was in, it's 5 stages of grief, and think of bargaining, denial, bargaining, anger, depression, acceptance. I was stuck in the anger phase forever. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't helping anyone. My blood pressure was up. I started blood pressure medication, pushed a lot of people away. But then therapy was wonderful, but I did do a lot of outdoors things, trying to be in nature, coping skills. I had journals on my own. For a little while, there was not a lot of positive coping skills for a second, but then when I started to do positive things and finding positive friends, like going canoeing in springs, or camping out, and having healthier people around me, and building a support network that was healthy rather than feeding off of my anger, really changed things for the better as well. Because you kind of, the way we feel inside is who we attract. So if we feel like wounded birds, we attract other wounded birds. When we feel angry, we have other angry people. People tend to relate. And the more healthy I felt, the more confident I felt, the more I attracted healthy, confident people as well around me. And it just was just a positive thing. I had to go through therapy to handle the grief in the right way, to get to the level of acceptance. And don't get me wrong, sometimes it goes back to depression, or every now and then, just because it's a photo album or whatever, just a second. But I love it. I've been in acceptance for that grief. But there's other things you grieve along the way in life, other situations. More situations arise, and you could recognize those symptoms and do something about it quicker, rather than just live in pain and self-medicate. Because through therapy and finding mindfulness, I use a lot of that, trying to stay in the present and not worry about the past or the future, and focus on what's happening today, here and now, not the what if world or the should have world. Dr. Amber Baker, she on the show is great. She's, go friend yourself, she said, and stop shoulding yourself. And it's so funny because it's so true. Like, we just need to stop saying I should have, or I wish I did, whatever, or could, shouldn't have, or what if this happens? And it's a waste of time. We just
woulda.
Stop shoulding yourself. But at the same time, it's trying to stay mindful, focus on the things we do have rather than the things we don't. Learn to be grateful and happy for ourselves of our accomplishments, rather than always wishing for more. Sometimes people don't take time to celebrate what we have accomplished. We look at what we haven't done, or where we should be or want to be, rather than look at how much we've already done. And we don't take time to really absorb it in. And a lot of accomplishments, even especially for people suffering with major depression and things like that, just getting up and getting showered is very challenging for them. Cleaning the house, anything. Pat yourself on the back if that is something that is hard for you. That's, even if it's, you look at it as it should be a task. It's easy for everyone. It's not. It's not easy for everyone. some people need that motivation. And then not only that, write down that accomplishment and say, I did this today. It's hard some days. Some days we just don't want to get out of bed. We don't want to go outside and see the beautiful day. Like, and there's something with that, but to force ourselves and to accomplish, even if it's one thing a day, baby steps always work to a higher purpose. And then, but be proud of just even accomplishing the little things in life. Calling a credit card company when they don't speak English, or get an automated attendant, man, I'm triggered. It's like push 2, and you push 2, and then it's like you're on something else. Like, I hate that. But we all have our things. But
yeah, here's the big question. So for all the people,
there's a big one now.
Here's the big question for all the people out there that think treatment and therapy is bullshit. What do you say to them?
Good luck with that. No, I'm just kidding.
And I'll tell you, I hear this often, from different people.
It means, okay, well, if you've been to one therapist and you're saying that now, it means that you haven't found the right therapist. You haven't found the perfect fit. Finding the right therapist that you can relate to, that you could tell anything to, that you could tell you cut someone's head off and put it in a fridge, like ever, that you can tell your deepest, darkest wounds and not feel judged, and that knows what they're doing, you'll see progress within yourself. And the people that say that it's crap, that they haven't found that fit, that purpose, or that therapist, the right one. They've tried it, or didn't give it their all. They didn't feel ready at the time. Whatever, because I've seen it heal so many people. And it's not crap. It just means that you haven't found the right fit, and you haven't done more work than the therapist. Some people want to come into client therapy and they want to just a magic wand and you do your work, but they're not willing to do the work themselves. We can give them all the tools in the world, and then they're like, I don't want to do that, or I didn't do it. Well, you're not going to get better if you're not going to do it, and the therapist can't work harder than the client. So we say, good luck with that. Then, live in your misery. But you can have a happier life, and you can have a happier marriage. You can have a happier relationship with your family. You can feel more confident. You can take on challenges that you were scared to do. You can put down that drink. You can live the life you wish you were living with the help, but you've got to want to do it.
I like that answer, because I agree with that. I'm not a 12-step person, for instance, but I obviously encourage people to go because it has helped a lot of people. Give it a try, check it out. And I tell people the same thing. They're like, oh, this meeting is ridiculous. And is that the only one you've tried? Maybe you should go look at another one and see if there's one out there that may fit for you. Mm-hmm. And that's a great answer, and I like that.
Not every clinical approach is for everyone. And on that note, so something I'm kind of a part of now, I'm a clinical director for this resort that's opening up in Belize called Jaguarundi Shores. And it's amazing. It's stuff that, it's in Belize, in paradise. And it's a therapeutic resort with different programs, but for couples retreat, that need to repair their relationship. I mean, in an exotic feature where they have jungle ziplining together and exotic excursions, while mixed with therapy and group therapy, individual couple therapy with licensed therapists. And they have chemical dependency retreat, not just for recovery, but for just a refresher. And but it's on the northern Belize coast. You're in paradise meanwhile. And all the excursions are tied into therapy. So that's called Jaguarundi Shores, spell the word Jaguar, UNDI Shores. And you can find it on Facebook. But I'm excited to be a part of that too, as well as the Moments of Clarity show. So it's and that's every Thursday and Friday, 12 to 1. Everyone has an exceptional guest with an inspirational story You were on my show, Eric. You have a great story as well. And then I have a private practice and a counseling center too. And there are all these things, just bad ones.
And what city are you in?
Safety Harbor, Florida.
Safety Harbor? Okay.
Mm-hmm. It's near Tampa, in between Tampa and Clearwater.
Okay.
St. Pete area.
I don't know Florida too well. I mean, I've been there.
So it's like the West Coast. So if you imagine the state of Florida, and there's like, if you imagine like the shape of a gun or whatever, and there's that little like curve where a trigger could look at or whatever, it's on that little crevice or whatever.
One thing I always like to do when I do meetings with people is I always like to give my guests an opportunity to say anything that you would like to say or be interested in saying that I haven't asked or related to a question. And so I wanted to give you that opportunity if you had something that in particular you wanted to talk about briefly.
I don't know. You asked pretty thorough questions. I don't know that we've got so much more growth to do with the mental health movement on ending the stigma on mental health, where people can actually not feel labeled or feel ashamed to seek help, because there's no shame in seeking mental health help. And for everyone working together, kind of like you and I are doing right now, I strongly believe that change can only come when we stand together as one, and to just keep speaking out on mental health, because so many people suffer in silence, and that you're not alone. Unfortunately, so many horrible things are more common than you think, and therapy can help. And just talking about it and knowing that someone can be there to listen with undivided attention, never tell anyone, and help you get through something as simple as stubbing a toe if it bothered you, to as big as trauma from childhood or anything, I mean, to problems at work or trouble with kids or stress or anxiety or just feeling like out of sorts. It doesn't have to be a chemical medication thing to seek counseling. Mm-hmm. People go in with just everyday problems, and that's what counseling is. You don't have to lay on a couch. It's not like that. When people come in for the first time, I do have a couch in there, but they usually sit on it. But they're like, am I supposed to lay down or something? It's not the way you see it on the movies. And it's a little more personal like that. If you don't feel happy, there's a reason for that, and that can change. Okay. And I certainly believe that everyone has a purpose in life. If you don't feel like you have a purpose, that's when you should find a counselor and figure out what you find a purpose. That's something that makes you happy, or like a activity, hobby, something that gives you a sense of purpose that you would love to do and you feel important. You're helping others or anything at the end of the day. Change can only come. And also, I strongly learned, I say this at the end of every show, to be kind to yourself and a stranger. You never know what they're going through. Thank you for this opportunity, Eric, to be on your show.
Yeah, I want to thank you for coming on. This was absolutely fantastic. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And I always like to throw out my email address. My email is recoveryecosystem@gmail.com. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to another episode of Recovering Through Highness. Let's keep getting high, but again, drugs and alcohol are not the way that you're going to do it and maintain it. And thank you. And I look forward to the next.
Thanks for having me.